I want to ask, what are your thoughts on NATO? Specifically now, I think it's talked about a lot. No, no,
What are your
no.
thoughts on NATO?
No, I think it's an important conversation because it's talked about a lot now, especially with this Ukraine war, and I think it's a tricky conversation to have because everyone says, well, it seems the conversation is now is that NATO is very important. We need to protect ourselves. But I remember that NATO was created to protect from the USSR, and when the USSR fell, there was an opportunity to not to dismantle NATO, and it seems that keeping NATO, in a way, played a role in keeping Russia an enemy instead of maybe building collaboration. Now, a lot of things happened, but what would be your
Sure.
thoughts on that?
Sure. I think it's a convenient narrative for Russia to say, oh, it's because of NATO, but actually Russian actions for a long time show that it's not it's about its own, it's about what its own leaders consider is in their best interest. So, the invasion of Georgia in 2008, Georgia is not part of NATO. We've seen the crises that have been caused in Transnistria and a part of Moldova. We've seen the hybrid attacks, even if not outright attacks in Estonia and other countries, even the Skripal poisoning on
Mm.
UK soil itself. So it's a convenient narrative to say, oh, we're just.
My
Sorry.
mom's calling.
Oh.
Busy.
Oh no, apologize to your mom for me. Um, it's a convenient narrative. At the end of the day, Russia has invaded the territory of another sovereign state, and that is pure and simple like a violation of its
Mm.
own international law. And Russia's own domestic circumstances mean that with stagnating economic situation, this also gives Putin an impetus to be in power to stay. Um, and to your other point, it's not just that throughout this period of time, we've had us in NATO, Putin over there. There have been fora to bring both sides together. So I spent a few years as Malta's youth ambassador to the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, the OSCE. And that is a forum from what they say is from um, Vancouver to
Mm.
Vladivostok, right? It goes from Canada to Russia. And so within that forum where everything has to pass by consensus, there have been attempts to negotiate, to draw in, to bring Russia into the fold. And for some time it was working, but at the end of the day, it isn't. And so Russia invaded Ukraine in 2014. I was at the ministerial summit where in Basel of the OSCE, where John
Mm.
Kerry stood up and said, and admonished Russia for it. And Lavrov, who seems to live forever, the foreign minister, who's still foreign minister now, like got up and walked out. Like
Wow.
it's, and so I'm not sympathetic because also when you're having a quarrel with some other people, you don't necessarily go and say,
Yeah.
I'm going to beat that guy to death. There are ways of trying to
Mm.
sort things out. So no,
But
I'm
what
not that
about from the
sympathetic.
perspective of people say that NATO had this promise of not 1 inch east? They had like this thing, they won't expand NATO,
Yeah.
and then slowly there were some expansions, and then I guess on the Russian side, that's
You
what
could,
they say is the
yeah. Again, it's a convenient narrative, but actually,
Mm.
the recruiter of the year for NATO has been Putin. Like as a result of his actions,
right.
Finland and Sweden, that I said were neutral for years and years and years and years, have said actually, I think would be safer if we
Mm.
joined this club. And so there is this principle of deterrence, which says that you know you try to deter conflict, and NATO is seen as a deterrence
Mhm.
mechanism. And if you ask the Baltics, they will say if it wasn't for NATO, they would also have been invaded by Russia by now.
Mm.
Hmm.
And they feel extremely strongly that NATO has actually been a way of protecting and enabling them to stand firm on the border of a large and aggressive neighbor. And so for us as on the outside, it can be um, for some, the narrative might be a bit sympathetic with what the Russians are trying to spin it as, but at the end of the day, it's a narrative. Like
Mm.
they're there because they want to occupy Ukrainian territory and not because NATO moved a little bit
Mhm.
east.